So, as you might know, because you've been coming often enough, I've been doing this series on the Noble Eightfold Path. And I can summarize some of the path in little bits and pieces throughout. But this talk is on right mindfulness and remembering what matters. A talk on the seventh step of the Noble Eightfold Path. And mindfulness, I've found, is not really what we think it is. That when many of us encounter the word mindfulness, it arrives wrapped up in cultural assumptions. We imagine calm, or we imagine stress reduction, or we imagine being a slightly better version of ourselves and more centered and less reactive and perhaps more pleasant to be around, even. And it's really, while it can do all of these things, the Buddha had something far more radical in mind. That right mindfulness, Samasati, is not merely about attention. It's not simply noticing what's happening, as often is instructed in meditation. It's a path factor. It's a major player in the Noble Eightfold Path, and it's embedded in an ethical and liberating framework whose explicit aim is the ending of suffering. Mindfulness, as the Buddha taught it, is not a tool for optimizing a busy life. It's a way of waking up inside the life we already have. It remembers what matters. It remembers the Dharma. It remembers that freedom is possible, even here. Right mindfulness, Samasati, the seventh factor of the Noble Eightfold Path, is more than present moment awareness. In the Buddha's teaching, mindfulness is a practice of remembering. Remembering the body, the heart, the Dharma, the possibility of freedom within each moment. Grounded in the four foundations of mindfulness, today I'd like to explore awareness of the body, feeling tone, states of mind, and key teachings that illuminate suffering and its release. And practiced with kindness and clarity, right mindfulness interrupts habitual reactivity, and it supports insight, compassion, and liberation in both meditation and in daily life. Right mindfulness is the seventh factor of the Noble Eightfold Path, and that placement is intentional and revealing. It's not an accident. By the time mindfulness is established, the path has already been doing its quiet work. When mindfulness is cultivated in its fullest sense, the path has already been shaping us in subtle ways. Here's the brief overview of the path factors that I've covered so far. We've begun with right view, seeing that suffering has causes and can end. Seeing clearly happens through right view, recognizing that suffering has causes and conditions and has cessation. And we have inclined the heart through right intention, the second step on the path, toward renunciation, goodwill, and harmlessness. And we've been nurturing the heart through right intention, letting go of harm and cultivating goodwill. We've steadied our lives with the middle three steps of the path: right speech, right action, right livelihood, reducing remorse and feelings of disconnection from social harmony. And we've learned through right effort how to encourage and support what's wholesome and release what is not. And mindfulness depends on these steps. It doesn't replace them. Mindfulness grows best in this enriched soil. As Bhikkhu Analayo, a respected German monk and translator, emphasizes again and again, mindfulness in the early Buddhist texts is never ethically neutral. It operates within a path shaped by wisdom and by compassion. And when removed from that context, mindfulness becomes thinner, useful, perhaps, but incomplete. Skillful mindfulness remembers the direction of the path, not just the details of the experience. So this is why sati is actually considered mindfulness as remembering. The Pali word, the language that was used in the time of the Buddha, it's often translated as mindfulness, but its root is to remember or to recollect. And this is quiet, but a profound shift, and it changes everything. Skillful mindfulness is it's not just knowing what's happening now. It's remembering how to relate what is happening now. It's remembering how to be with the present moment. The intention to be kind, the understanding of impermanence, the truth that this moment too is workable. Remembering the Dharma, the intention to meet experience without greed or aversion, the truth of impermanence, and the possibility of non-clinging. In the Satipaṭṭhāna Sutta, the Buddha describes mindfulness as being established as ardent, clearly knowing, and mindful, having put away covetousness and grief for the world. He describes mindfulness as being established as ardent, clear knowing, and mindful, having put away covetousness and grief for the world. That's a big put away. And this phrase alone tells us a great deal. Mindfulness is not passive. It actively remembers not to be pulled into wanting or resisting. And it remembers to stay awake. It remembers not to get lost in wanting or resisting. So I'd like to give an overview of the 4 foundations of mindfulness. I think most of you have heard of the 4 foundations of mindfulness and are probably familiar with them, but the Buddha articulated right mindfulness through the 4 foundations of mindfulness. And it's taught most fully in the Satipaṭṭhāna Sutta, and it is also in the Mahā-Satipaṭṭhāna Sutta, a more extended version. And these 4 foundations are mindfulness of the body, mindfulness of feeling tone, mindfulness of the mind, mindfulness of Dhammas, the 4 foundations of mindfulness. They're not stages that need to be completed in order. They're overlapping dimensions of experience available in every moment. And together they form a comprehensive map of human life as it is lived. And so the first foundation, mindfulness of the body, Kayanupassana, suggests this nature as teacher. This is why the body comes first. The Buddha begins the practice of mindfulness with the body, with breathing, with posture, movement, and physical sensations, not with philosophy, not with psychology, but with the body. Why do you suppose that is? Because the body is where life actually happens. The body breathes like the tide. It rises and falls like weather. It ages like a tree that does not argue with the seasons. Although I have to say, I wish my body were not quite so argumentative with the process sometimes. And when we sit and feel the breath, we're not doing something artificial. We're aligning with a process that has been happening since before we were born. Mm-hmm. The Buddha begins with the body, not ideas, not beliefs, not emotions, but this living form. The body anchors awareness in immediacy. It doesn't speculate. It breathes. It aches. It shifts. It ages. Mindfulness of the body includes breathing, Anapanasati, posture, movement, the four elements, and reflections on impermanence and death. So why does the Buddha begin here? Because the body is where reactivity first appears. Before a thought forms, there's tightening. Before anger speaks, there's heat. Before fear narrates, there's contraction. A well-revered Thai forest monk, Ajahn Sumedho, points out the body is not an obstacle to practice. It is the field of practice. The body teaches impermanence directly, and it teaches humility, and it teaches patience. Mindfulness of the body grounds awareness in something trustworthy. It brings us home. Just as a forest floor holds falling leaves and broken branches and new growth all at once, the body holds pleasure, pain, fatigue, vitality without preference. Mindfulness of the body is learning to stay still long enough to see this. Now, the second foundation is mindfulness of feeling tone. This is Vedanupassana, Vedana. If the body tells us what's happening, feeling tone tells us how it feels. If the body is the landscape, feeling tone is the weather moving through it. We can notice that every experience carries a tone, pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. This is one of the Buddha's most psychologically precise teachings. We tend to believe that our suffering comes from circumstances. But the Buddha points instead to our relationship with feeling tone. The Buddha's insight here is remarkably precise. We suffer not simply because things happen, but because of how we react to how they feel. Pleasant feelings lead to grasping. I want more. Unpleasant feeling leads to aversion. I want this gone. And neutral feeling leads to dullness or forgetting. I forget to be here. When mindfulness clearly recognizes feeling tone as feeling tone without further interpretation, the automatic chain reaction is interrupted. Joseph Goldstein, the founder of Insight Meditation Society in Barre, Massachusetts, points out that the moment between feeling and reaction is where freedom quietly enters. The moment between feeling and reaction is where freedom quietly enters. His book on mindfulness is a recent classic for studying and understanding mindfulness as the path to liberation. I left it over here on the table in case you don't know about it or want to look at it. And it's a fantastic book. In our Tuesday tea time, we took like a year to go through it, but it is well worth having in your library. The third foundation is mindfulness of mind, Citta-Nupassana. In Pali, there's a lot, it's a lot harder to make Pali words really mean the right thing in English. But citta in general, it really is translated as heart and mind, not just the mind. It's heart, mind. And in this third foundation, mindfulness turns toward the state of mind itself. And so here the Buddha invites us to recognize a contracted mind as contracted, recognize a scattered mind as scattered, a mind with greed as a mind with greed, and a mind without greed as a mind without greed. And this is recognition. It's not analysis. To name the state of mind is already to loosen identification with it. Just as we might notice clouds passing across the sky, mindfulness notices mental states passing through awareness. The sky is not harmed by the clouds. As Gil Fronsdale, a well-respected teacher in Redwood City, California, says, mindfulness does not try to fix the mind. It learns to trust awareness more than the content of thought. Mindfulness does not try to fix the mind. It learns to trust awareness more than the content of thought. Mental states are seen as conditions arising and passing, not as who we are. And then the fourth foundation of mindfulness is mindfulness of the Dhammas, Dhammanupassana. In the fourth foundation, mindfulness becomes explicitly wisdom-oriented. And so here mindfulness clearly remembers the teachings themselves. Here we contemplate key frameworks of the Dharma. This is where some of the major teaching starts coming in lists. The common ones listed in this fourth foundation are the five hindrances, the five aggregates, the six sense bases, the seven factors of awakening, and the four noble truths. And this is mindfulness remembering the teachings themselves, not as concepts, but as lenses for understanding experience. We're remembering the map, not as a theory, really, but as a living guide. Bhikkhu Bodhi, a very prolific translator of the Buddha's teaching, explains, this foundation integrates mindfulness and insight, preventing practice from becoming vague or self-absorbed. So I'd like to take a pause here just for a moment for us to practice together a little. And so I'd like to invite you to sit comfortably or simply listen and allow the body to settle. Feel the body sitting. Feel the weight of the body resting, like a stone placed gently on the earth. Feel the contact with the floor or the chair. Allow the eyes to close or lower the gaze. And bring your attention to the breath, not to control it, not to improve it, just to know it. Breathe in, knowing that you are breathing in, a direct lived experience. Breathing out, knowing you are breathing out. Present with the breath leaving the body. And now gently widen the attention to the body as a whole. Notice the sensations. Maybe there's pressure, warmth, movement. There's no need to label or judge. Like listening to a forest in the early morning, nothing needs to be named. Notice sensations. If you notice a pleasant sensation, simply know present. And if unpleasant sensation is present, know unpleasant. And if things feel neutral, know that too. Let the heart mind be just as it is. If it's restless, know restlessness. If it's not restless, notice that. If it's agitated, no agitation. If it's not agitated, notice that. If it's calm, no calm. If there is joy, no joy. If it wanders, gently return, like guiding a young animal back on a path. Nothing to fix. Nothing to force. Just remembering to be here. Rest here for a few breaths. When you're ready, gently reopen the eyes. In the Saṃyutta Nikāya, the Buddha describes mindfulness as knowing when a hindrance is present and when it is absent. Lots of times we notice when a hindrance is present, but we don't very often notice when it's absent. A place that's more, as it's been described, happy, contentment of body and mind. This knowing is already liberating. And as Ayasantusika, one of my favorite nuns in Santa Cruz, California, teaches, that mindfulness does not scold the mind for hindrances, it meets them with clarity and with kindness. Now I'd like to expand a little bit on the fourth foundation, mindfulness of the Dhammas. Things get a little more complicated here, but in the fourth foundation of mindfulness, the Buddha invites us to bring mindful awareness not only to immediate experience, but to experience seen through the lens of the Dharma. And this is where mindfulness and wisdom begin to work hand in hand. Here, mindfulness remembers the teachings themselves, not as abstract ideas, not as living patterns that help us understand, but as living patterns that help us understand suffering and its release. So mindfulness remembers the teachings themselves, not as abstract ideas, but as living patterns that help us understand suffering and its release. As I mentioned earlier about the lists in the fourth foundations, but I'll mention them briefly. The first is mindfulness and the five hindrances. I think most of us understand what's referred to as the hindrances. Right mindfulness is essential in working with the five hindrances. And those five hindrances are sensual desire, ill will, sloth and torpor, restlessness and worry, and doubt. And I suspect many of these come up for you as they do for me during a sitting period. Not to worry. When mindfulness is present, it simply is aware of them without judgment, and it sees them pass. And next, we have the five aggregates, the khandhas. The Buddha frequently described experience in terms of these five aggregates. Form, which is the body, feeling tone, perception, mental formations, and consciousness. Mindfulness of the aggregates helps us see that what we usually call a self is actually this dynamic process, not a fixed entity. It's made up of form and feeling tone and perception and mental formations and consciousness. And each aggregate arises due to conditions and then passes away. And as mindfulness becomes steady, we can begin to notice this is feeling, not me, or this is thought, not mine, or this is consciousness that's arising and passing. In the Khandha Sutta, the Buddha repeatedly encourages this kind of careful observation. Seeing the aggregates clearly weakens identification and softens clinging. And the heart learns to hold experience more lightly because we're not grasping at a sense of self. We can see each of these things are impermanent. The body, the feeling, tone, perception, mental formations, and consciousness. For me on retreat, when pain arose in my knee, what surprised me was not the intensity of the sensation, but how quickly the story about it dissolved when mindfulness stayed present. There was pain, there was fear, there was resistance, and there was space. Mindfulness did not make the pain go away. It made the experience honest. And honesty, I discovered, is far more spacious than control. Honesty is far more spacious than control. And then we have the six sense spaces. Mindfulness of the six sense spaces: ear, eye, nose, tongue, body, and mind. It brings awareness to how experience is continuously formed through contact with the sense doors. Everything in our world we create through our sense doors. Conditions come together and we notice it at one of the sense doors. Seeing happens when eye and form meet. And hearing happens when the ear and sound meet. Thinking happens when the mind and mental objects meet. Mindfulness here reveals that experience is constructed moment by moment, not happening to a solid observer. When contact is known clearly, we see how quickly liking, disliking, and stories arise. In another sutta, the Buddha shows how freedom grows when we know sense contact without grasping. We just know that hearing is happening, that seeing is happening. We learn to experience the world fully without being swept away by it. Fourth is the 7 factors of awakening, the Bojjhangas. The 7 factors of awakening describe how the path matures from mindfulness to liberation. There's mindfulness, there's investigation, there's energy and joy, tranquility, concentration, and equanimity. You might remember when Tara Mollay was here a couple of weeks ago, she expanded on the 7 factors of awakening. And mindfulness is both the first factor and the thread that weaves through all the others. So here we have mindfulness again as the first factor of the 7 factors of awakening. With mindfulness present, we can sense what the mind needs. More energy when dull, more calm when agitated, more balance when effort becomes strained. In the Bojjhanga Sutta, the Buddha describes these factors as conditions that naturally arise and develop when mindfulness is well established. So awakening is not forced and it's not grasped after. It is cultivated. We're cultivating it. And last in this list of the 5 is the 4 Noble Truths, a list that you're much more familiar with, I suspect. And so finally here, mindfulness of Dhammas includes contemplation of the 4 Noble Truths, the truth of suffering, the truth of its cause, the truth of its cessation, and the path leading to its end. Here, mindfulness becomes deeply compassionate and realistic. It doesn't turn away from suffering, nor does it drown in it. It knows suffering clearly, understands its causes, especially craving, and recognizes moments of relief, moments of releasing, however small. Mindfulness becomes deeply compassionate and realistic. It doesn't turn away from suffering, and it doesn't drown in it. It knows suffering clearly, understands its causes, especially craving, and recognizes moments of release, however small. In the Mahā-Satipaṭṭhāna Sutta, the Buddha explicitly weaves the 4 Noble Truths into mindfulness practice, showing that awareness is not an end unto itself. It serves as liberation. Mindfulness remembers not only what is happening, but why it matters. And so, in a way, bringing this all together, In this fourth foundation of mindfulness, becomes a form of wise remembering. It remembers that experience is conditioned, that clinging creates suffering, craving creates suffering, and that release is possible. Mindfulness here is no longer just present moment awareness. It's awareness aligned with awakening. And in my earlier retreat story reference, what surprised me most was not that the pain was workable, but that the story about the pain dissolved faster than the sensation itself. That happens a lot with me, with my spine and my hip. It's like the story about the pain can dissolve faster than the sensation in the body. Mindfulness in that case of the retreat, it didn't make me heroic. It just made me honest. And honesty, it turns out, is incredibly freeing. In mentioning mindfulness in daily life, I'd like to point out that right mindfulness does not stay on the cushion. It notices the tightening that happens before harsh speech, or the pause before reacting, the ache beneath defensiveness, and the urge to turn away, and the moment when kindness is possible. As Sharon Salzberg reminds us, mindfulness without kindness becomes brittle, and kindness without mindfulness becomes blind. Together, they form a path of care. In the Anapanasati Sutta, the Buddha describes mindfulness of breathing, leading all the way to liberation when cultivated and developed. That's one of the several and few places that there is direct instruction of cultivating the breath. Mindfulness shows us impermanence, not as a concept, but as a lived truth. And it reveals not self, not as an idea, but as release. In closing, may we remember again and again, right mindfulness is not about perfect presence. It's about returning again and again with patience, with kindness, with care. And I'd like to close here and mention that I covered a lot of information on a very complex subject of skillful mindfulness in a very short amount of time. So perhaps some of it was complicated or you couldn't understand it. Don't worry about it. If some of the information landed in a way that was useful, hopefully it will come out another time as a remembrance. And also, at least for us in the room, I have a cheat sheet. I have simple notes and suttas to refer to if you feel moved to look any of them up. And I'll mention again Joseph Goldstein's book, Mindfulness, A Practical Guide to Awakening, as well as his series of Dharma talks from that book on those chapters. There's like 32 of them. So I'd like to close with a dedication. May we remember what matters. May mindfulness steady our hearts. And may this remembering carry us toward freedom. May the mindfulness we cultivate be rooted in kindness and guided by wisdom. May it steady us in times of ease and carry us gently through times of difficulty. May this remembering soften the heart, clarify the mind, and support the end of suffering for ourselves and for all beings. And may we dedicate the merit of our practice to someone who comes to mind that can use this extra care. And may we also dedicate it to all beings that they may be free from anxiety and danger, free from suffering and the causes of suffering. And may they know the causes of happiness.